All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Just a couple quick words for the whole group, and then maybe we'll take children's teachers and do a breakout, that kind of thing. But just a couple things for everyone to know. One is both of them are situational. One is very simple and lighthearted. The other one is more of a evaluation of our situation as we move through a transition, things to be thinking about. On the first, we have a functional church library through the donation of a professor of mine, and then a little bit from Pastor Danny and a couple others. We have a really good church library. I'll give you some more details in just a second. And then, of course, we're going through this time of transition as a church. We got to think about that as we're doing Sunday school ministry. So here's our library room, 106. It's on, as you go down the education building hallway on the bottom floor, it's like your fourth door on the left, room 106. There's a few different sections in there. The first section on the left there, when you're looking at the room, is the biggest section. That's your biblical studies and theological studies library section. So if you're studying something for Sunday school and you have a question about some particular part of the Bible, there are commentaries in there. Certain doctrines, there are books on those doctrines, everything from the doctrines about God, like Trinity and stuff, all the way down to doctrines about practical theology, like prayer, missions, and that kind of stuff. Just for familiarity, the biblical study stuff is on the left, and there are labels you'll be able to see as you move right into the big shelves. It's theological works, and over to the right you get to practical ministry. This little bookshelf here is actually a shelf. The shelf and the books were donated by Pastor Danny, a collection of his books. I've labeled, so this first set on the left, I labeled the Peter Kendrick Theological Library. He's a theology professor of mine and donated those books. The other one has a sign above it, Pastor Danny Jones Leadership Collection, because he donated some church leadership books that are in there. You're welcome to check out those as well. This third shelf, straight back, is a teacher reference shelf. So for you teachers, this will be especially useful. It includes at the top, it has books on like actually teaching a class or doing like lesson planning or lesson development or whatever, getting your lessons ready, that kind of stuff. Going down from there is useful commentaries, very good reference, just go-to kind of things. And right below that, the second shelf is like some Spurgeon sermons and then a set of his work on the Psalms. So just some easy reference material. There below there is a set of different commentaries, some Tyndale, small volume Tyndale commentaries. And then below that is the Barnes Notes, which is another set. Down at the very bottom shelf is Broadman commentary, a Southern Baptist commentary, and a few of the MacArthur commentaries. So if you're looking for commentaries, quick reference for yourself, that's a good shelf. In between there is a backgrounds commentary. So I want to emphasize this real quick. If you're studying passage and there's something there and you're like, hey, I really don't get that. That seems really old or ancient or something in a passage, you can go look at those and go to that passage. It'll probably have a little blurb to give you a little more context about that. But those two little shelves there are more general studies works. There's works on regular history, on leadership, parenting, that kind of thing. Up here in the front is our reference shelf for everyone. So these aren't to be checked out, but you can pull them out and look. Bible encyclopedias, Bible dictionaries, a single volume systematic theology if you need to just check on a certain thing you read about, the doctrine of some kind, and word study materials. There's also a book on apologetics there for big topics in apologetics reference, and a book on cults. So if someone asks you about a certain cult or sect, it's a good reference for that to get a little clue on that stuff. And then our little checkout book. If you want to check a book out, open that thing up. There's slots, write your name, the book title, that kind of stuff. Bring it back in 30 days, usually. So that's our library. You can use that. The whole church can use that, but I want to especially make you guys aware of it. As far as transition goes, we're in a couple levels of transition. Societally, we're in a transition. We have been for the last 2 years or so. But we're sort of on the back end of what you could, quote unquote, call a full return from COVID. People that have been out the longest are starting to come back and feel comfortable being out in public again. And so we're seeing some people that are the first time attendees because of that out of the last couple of years. Some for the first time they've been here in a while. So people are being impacted for the Lord in a fresh way after not being around for some period of time. We want to be aware of that and take advantage of that. Now be sensitive to that when you have people that used to come here and now they're back again. You're like, where you been? Don't ask them that like that. That's not a good strategy. Where you been? Greet them and bring them back into the fold, that kind of thing. We have groups that, because of that, are hitting their space limits, and we'll talk some more about space and limits and stuff like that later. We have a new class beginning because of some of this. We have people coming back and they're saying like, hey, where is that class I used to go to? And that kind of thing. And so we're having renewed fellowship. And this is true across our society, right? But then even in our church, within that larger transition, we're in a transition. The retirement of Pastor Danny and hirement, I made that word up, hirement of someone else. Pastor Jim is transitional pastor for now, but we're in the midst of a transition. So the need for community is high. We need to help the church feel that this is still the same community, still the same church. Pastor Danny was a meaningful part of this community, but the community continues to go on, and we continue to do ministry together. The need for continuity is high, providing familiar faces, familiar structure, and the same for consistency. Sunday school is something that happens every week. A place people can go and say, this is very normal. The lessons hopefully aren't exactly the same, but generally it's the same kind of structure you provide in your Sunday school. It's a place for people to feel like, this is still my church. And the church is these people and this ministry that we do. So we're in a couple levels of transition. That's just something to be aware of as we think through what it means to do Sunday school at Northlake. So we'll get into Sunday school for adults in a second, but Miss Mindy, you can take your folks out. That's all I got to say for the whole group. The rest of this will be boring for children's teachers and for the children that are here also, probably. So if you're going Miss Mindy, you guys can go ahead to your breakout. I think it was a prompt no. Hopefully it'll be interesting. It'll be boring to me. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Start hitting that way.
Thanks. Appreciate your help. I'll take these scores and place them back in the calendar. Thanks, y'all. There you go. Okay, so I'm recording this for the rest of our Sunday school teachers that couldn't be here this week, so we're gonna act like they're here anyway. The camera's up there, but it can't see most of you, so if you make faces, they won't see you. Okay, so Northlake Ministry Matrix. I use that term because it's a fun word. It has an X in it. Matrix is a good movie. So Northlake Ministry Matrix, how does Sunday school fit in with the ministry that Northlake does as a church? So we have congregational ministry. So this is any group over 50, right? You're in this territory of congregational, maybe 75. You could change it to 75. It's a rough number there. But this is when you're doing congregational ministry, big picture type of stuff, big event type of stuff. Underneath that, you have what you could call large groups. And so again, these numbers are rough, but just giving you an idea, groups that are anywhere from 15 to 50 are usually going to be what we at Northlake would call like a ministry group. So we have men's ministry, women's, youth, senior adult. We have others. I just put those as examples. These are ministries that at each level doing all 4 E's: exalt, equip, evangelize, encourage. So we do that as a congregation. Each ministry is also meant to be doing things like exalting through Bible study and worship, to be equipping and discipling people within that group, to be doing outreach and to be doing fellowship, those kind of things. And most of them do really well. And each level has a different, unique thing they offer, right? So then we get down to small groups. And so these are all of our adult Sunday school classes. Our small groups are anywhere from 5 to 15 usually, right? So these groups, because of their size, we'll talk about these things in a second, are especially important within our church. And so at the bottom, we have personal discipleship and ministry, like your family or one-on-one, one-on-two, that kind of thing, that kind of ministry. So we are focused on how our small groups, which the coordination of our small groups is called Sunday school, right? So this whole category here, my job as Sunday school, whatever, is to coordinate these small groups together to figure out to fit their role in the church's ministry, larger ministry, right? And we're able to do some unique things, just like the other levels do their own unique things. So let's talk about what we as small groups can do uniquely. What is the function? What is the strategy we can have as a small group? Well, first off, as a small group, it can be a lamp for your own path. And so what I'm emphasizing here is something a little different than just your standard Bible study. If there's 30, 35 people in a room, you just can't get your own questions asked. Your people in your Bible study would not be able to ask their personal concerns. It'd be hard to address them in any timely fashion. But at the level of a small group, you actually have the ability to know one another well and actually give people a space to ask, right? So we're familiar with that. So it's personalized group Bible study, but it's also consistent. You know those people, you can be there each week. So each time I'm going to put a couple others up here. But if people have Bibles with them on their phone, if you can look up some of these verses, I'll have you guys read them in just a moment. So can somebody get Psalm 119 verse for me? Just volunteer. All right, Brett, thanks. Can someone get 2 Timothy? You might have it memorized. You can go off that. Miss Vicky's got that one. We're going to have Acts 6, not the whole chapter, the part where they go and help the widows. James 5:19 is another. So can I get Acts 6 first? Somebody, I didn't put the specific verses. Robert, thank you. How about James 5:19? All right, thanks, Dwayne. How about Hebrews 10:24? All right, Matt. I'm going to go back and take these off the screen so we get a little development on our screen. But who's got Great Commission? Matthew 28, 18-20. Thanks, Philip. All right, how about Ephesians 4:12? I have a Bible if anyone needs to borrow one if you didn't bring yours in. Okay, you got your phone? All right. And then a couple more. John 13, 33 and 34. Anyone else? Okay, we'll get there in a second. So who's got Psalm 119? You there, Brett? Go ahead and read that for us.
Your instructions are more valuable to me than millions in gold and silver.
Okay, so God's word that whole psalm, obviously super long, incredible statement of the value of God's instruction, God's word, God's law. And it's extremely valuable to the point where we want to study it every week. It's really a unique thing that a pastor can do in preaching a sermon on Sunday mornings at the congregational level. But there are simply things he cannot accomplish there in that context. He can't speak to everyone. But you and your groups can reach in and grab that gold of God's word consistently every week. Some of our ministries are seasonal, for example, but Sunday school is meant to be something that's always ongoing for the most part. 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. Do that every time. I can never, and when I'm memorizing this verse, I always want to put the 1 Timothy there. Okay, so that said that God's word is useful for reading, right? It is, but the point of reading is to do something and equip for every good word, right? So part of the point of doing a close group Bible study is people can actually personally be impacted and changed. Their own life concerns can be addressed in that conversation. So that's one of the powerful things about small group. Another thing that's available at a unique level is no sheep left behind. So in our church as a whole, we notice sometimes that people are gone. It's impossible for a pastor at the congregational level to notice each week when someone's gone, or it's very difficult. It takes a lot of coordination to keep track of everyone that's sick or out, especially when it's more subtle. They don't just leave. They're not just sick. They usually come every week. Then suddenly they're just coming every other week, then once a month, and then suddenly they're not there anymore. It's hard to keep track of that at large group levels. And we can do this some at our ministry levels, which is super helpful. But at the small group level, we can do this really well. You notice when someone's out or when someone has stopped coming, and you have a chance to reach out and grab them. How about who has that passage in Acts 6?
The Grecian Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked.
Yes, yes. All right, so the widows in the early church, the early church is doing great, right? But they also were realizing, oh, we weren't meeting all the needs. They knew that because they knew everyone's needs. And then shortly thereafter in Acts 6, they're like, hey, can we get like 6 or some odd dudes? Like, can we get a few dudes to come and like give those people some food? And they do, because they are aware of the need. They know each other that well. And that's something that small groups are able to do at a uniquely personal level at the church level, to be aware of needs, both temporal and spiritual. How about James 5:19?
Brethren, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns the sinner from error of the way will save the soul from death and cover multitudes.
Okay, so James is in that passage is talking about a brother who's walking off the path and the need to reach out and grab them and bring them back onto the path. That's something as a small group we're able to do so consciously and be aware and know each other well. I mean, it takes, we'll talk about fellowship in a minute, it takes a close relationship to do that. You can't just barely know people and do that. It takes knowing. And that's part of what small groups are able to do. We'll talk about in a second. But you're aware of discipleship and spiritual growth, where someone is in their spiritual journey. How about Hebrews 10:24?
And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works.
So in knowing each other that closely, we can do this at the congregational level in one way, right? It's really encouraging toward good works to sing with all of you on Sunday morning. And also to get together with demographically, like in a men's study or women's event or whatever, to get together with those people, that's also encouraging at a different level. And then this is a whole nother kind of encouragement when you know each other and you're able to speak into each other's lives helpfully, not just correctively, but helpfully. And so we're able to do that role with small groups. We're also able to be redeeming arm of the Lord. We actually, as small groups, can be teams that go out and do outreach ministry with a personal touch. And one of the things that people nowadays, and in light of all the stuff that has happened with evangelists over the last, 50 years, a lot of people are skeptical of public, large group presentations of the gospel. Of course, the Lord can work in those things anyway, but just on the outside, people that are not Christians feel a little weird about listening to preaching sometimes. But as a small group, when you go out and do outreach and it's someone that you or someone in your group knows personally, that presentation of the gospel or that act of service of love makes a huge difference. It really connects them and it offers a chance to bring them into the fold in a real and long-term way. Who has Matthew 28?
And Jesus came and said, all authority in heaven and earth is given me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded. And behold, I'm with you all to the end of the age.
Thank you. So this is a Great Commission classic. We're to go. And at the congregational level, we do this. We have mission trips that go out. We do like Vacation Bible School and Fall Festival. Now, I'm going to ask Matt and Vicki, how much coordination does it take to run a mission trip in a VBS? A ton, right? That's why we do those things like once a year. At the congregational level, it is really hard to coordinate outreach events more than occasional, right? But at the small group level, when you're talking to a dozen people, you can actually schedule something. Coordinating calendars of 5 or 6 families is a lot easier than 50. Okay, so this makes it actually possible to say, okay, we can actually go out and go somewhere. And then Ephesians 4:12, who had that one? Yeah, so that passage is talking about the Holy Spirit being in all of us, giving gifts to each one, ultimately for the saints, you guys, to be equipped for every good work. And so we're able to actually use those gifts in this scenario and do so in a personal touch kind of way that we wouldn't be able to at the large scale and create lasting connections and meaningful moments in people's lives. And so we'll talk some more about this, but definitely encourage you to be thinking through how your group can do outreach. It can be something simple. If you can't go like I don't know, hand stuff out on the street corner. Maybe you're not able to stand that long. People in your class can't do that. That's okay. But you can call people. We're gonna do we'll talk about this at some other time. We're doing a church outreach of some things the church is doing moving forward. And a lot of it is sending cards and calling people that are just sort of connected to the church and we know have some interest, right? So there are things you can do for outreach, and we'll talk about that moving forward. But you can do it personally in a small group in a way that's hard in larger groups. And finally, encouraging fellowship. John 13, 33 and 34. Did we get there? I guess I could have volunteered for one. This is my presentation after all. I'll get John 13 if somebody can grab Ephesians 4. Oh, you got John? Okay, great. Okay, I'll get John. John 13, 33 and 34. Actually, it's 34 and 35. I give you a new commandment. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And so in a small group setting, at the congregational level, we can grow to love each other and know each other to some depth. At the ministry level, we can get to know each other and love each other even more deeply. But at the small group level of a dozen people or so, you can really get to know each other almost like family. And I intentionally use the term intimacy because that's the familial kind of closeness you can get when you're at your family gatherings. You go for a Christmas gathering with the grandparents, the parents, and the kids. 3 generations, maybe 4 at a Christmas gathering, and you feel that closeness. Small groups can approximate that. They can get close to that with some effort. So you can get together at that size. Something you can't do at a congregational level, something you can't do even like at a whole ministry level, is get together at somebody's house. Right? Most people's houses cannot host more than 15 people, and that's pushing. Some people's houses can get up to 20, maybe 25 if they're strategic. But you get over that, you can't meet in people's homes. And I'm not sure what it is. There's probably like a psychological term for it. But there's a kind of closeness that is developed when you meet together in someone's home that you don't get if you do it at another venue, or even if you do it here in this nice, fancy building that we have here. Okay, so there's just a different kind of connection that's built, and you share personal stories. People look at the pictures you got on the mantle and say, "Who's that?" And you got to tell the story about your daughter and how she went to here, and this dog you got that one time, and how it ate your couch, and then you threw it away, and the dog died, and you cried, all that stuff. So you share those things when you meet at home, and at this level, you can actually do that. And again, group activities are manageable. You can go do something in public as a group, and you don't have to like sell out the restaurant, right? You don't have to like. Our college and career was able to go do a kayaking event. If they had like 20 people, it'd be pretty tough. If they had 25, they had 30, 40 people, kayaking is not an option because you're going to lose people. They're going to be way up the river. You're going to be waiting like 3 hours on them to catch up when somebody's done. They work really hard to do that with traveling day camp and the tubing with the kids. And it's hard enough when there's children.
We accomplished it this summer.
They managed it.
We had 25.
There you go.
Kayak.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Tubing in the past, my bad. But yeah, you can actually manage space-wise, schedule-wise, again, to make it happen with this level of group that you can't at these larger group levels. And that's really what we're aiming for, is those kinds of things. And they each build up one another, right? So the more familially close you are, when you go have a Bible study and someone says, "Yeah, I remember there was a time with my brother, and this text applies to that here." You know their brother maybe, and that means more to you now as they share. Or they can actually say, "Hey, that reminds me of when you were telling me about your mom and how God works through that situation." It can become a more group-oriented and close Bible study time. And then when someone is struggling or has a need, you'll know that because you spent time just chatting, just getting to know one another. And then when you go out and you go do an outreach event or you talk to people on the phone, whatever, there's actually cohesion. There's coordination. There's chemistry. Is the sports term among the team to accomplish that purpose. So those things all work together. Those are, you see in the background, I've put the 4 E's. That's what we do at Northlake. We believe that if we are carrying out these 4 E's, roughly, you may subdivide them in different categories, but that we will be growing as a church, we'll be growing in discipleship as a church, as individuals, as groups. So that's what we're trying to do, is aim for those 4 E's. So within our Sunday school classes, there are 3 ideals I like to think of. Okay, 3 ideals. So if we want the Sunday school to function as the small groups to function within their place in the larger ministry of Northlake, then we have to think in these three ideals, at least, of things we're aiming for. Now, the first one is ideal leaders. That doesn't mean you guys have to be perfect. I mean the ideal set of leaders, right? And so when I say ideal leaders, I want you to think multiple leaders, not one teacher. Okay, if everything's on one person, it's too much, especially if that person has any kind of other responsibilities in their life. Now, sometimes a teacher can also serve as some of these other positions we'll talk about, like a fellowship coordinator, and that's great if you're able to do that. But think multiple leaders of a small group, not just the one head honcho that has to do it all or whatever. Okay, so a class is meant to be a tiny ministry group, not just a Bible study. You're all like, if you think of the congregational level as the church, you think of the ministries level as like many churches within the church, and you think of small groups as like many churches. Like these groups are trying to do all four E's, just in a closer way that adds different nuance to our spiritual growth. So in reach, we'll talk about these in a moment, but in reach is the practice of administrating the group, keeping track of folks in your group, who's sick, who needs prayer, who's been out, who has a big job interview we need to be praying for, that I can call them up and ask them how it went, and so on. Updating groups for prayer, just seeing where people are in their journey, and just paying attention. So that's kind of what an in-reach person does. Fellowship, a fellowship coordinator is the person that's trying to help gather. Like corporate world, you call it team building, right? They go on retreats and you do these weird activities to get closer or whatever. It's a similar thing. It's gathering to build positive community, right? Friendships that shape your identity as a person. So not just like we get together and hang out like at the Georgia game and everybody's like, "Oh, we're on the same team. This is great." But like actually get to know each other, so that it shapes who you are in Christ. And finally, outreach or evangelism or whatever coordinator you want to call it, that's the practice of directly reaching out to the community to bring them closer to Jesus. That's your group being present as much as possible with some other group of people that don't know Jesus in some shape or form to make a personal touch impact. So that's ideal leaders. You need a few different of those. We'll talk some more about that. The next one is ideal activities. So a Sunday school class needs a regular rhythm of ministry together. So think manageable rhythm, not occasional hangouts. So think about a more regular time of getting together. I would say like a good intermediate goal that probably any class could accomplish is trying to get together like once a quarter in some form. Maybe one time it's just hanging out and fellowshipping and getting to know each other, team building. The other time it's doing some activity, service, evangelism, kind of thing. And this works even at the youth level. Like I was just thinking of the youth, they are good at these things. They enjoy these activities. They enjoy hangouts, right? Matt, as a ministry coordinator for the youth, will help that group as a whole do it. But even within those smaller groups, you can encourage those closer relationships. But also think evangelism and service too, not just fellowship. So we want to say Sunday school class is more than just a Bible study. It's also more than just a Bible study of people that know each other well. It's a Bible study of people that know each other well, that does the Lord's work. Right? We are the mission teams. Small groups are the local mission teams. We send a team up to West Virginia. You guys are the teams that we send here. And finally, ideal size. Oh, wait, before I go there, ideal activities. I want to reiterate, this includes encouragement and evangelism activities. Every adult Sunday school class has $300 budgeted to help cover evangelism efforts and $300 to help cover fellowship efforts. Okay, so the church has voted to approve that budget the last couple of years, and that'll help you guys do the ministry of the church. And something that I know a lot of people think, and I've heard voiced a couple of times, is the feeling like we don't want to spend the church's money. But I want to like turn the paradigm around a little bit, that the church is calling you to do ministry as a Sunday school, right? When they approve that budget, just like we approve a budget to send money to international missions, we expect those missionaries to do the missions, right? And that's the same for our classes. Our church is expecting small groups to play that role of doing the unique thing they can do of those missions, of getting to know each other and reaching out into the community in a personal way. And so that's $300 will go by pretty fast. It will. And if you need more than that, we can talk. And maybe your class, you can take up a collection from your class after that if you need. But that's just something to get you started. So you have something, some basis to do some stuff. And there's always free activities, right? Like having people over for a cookout is not going to cost you $300 probably. Okay, so that's some of the things you can think of. I would say you want to do each of those a night. A moderate goal is to do a couple get-togethers a year, a couple activities of like outreach kind of thing a year. If you can make that work. So we'll talk about how to do that in a moment. Finally, ideal size. So think group intimacy and multiplication, not group expansion. So we have quite a few groups that are hitting the limits of their room right now, right? And we only have so many rooms that can hold more than 15 people comfortably. Most of our rooms, the large amount of our rooms, cannot hold more than 20 people at all. Like even if you had all the chairs filled. Most people don't like to sit in a room where all the chairs are filled. Sometimes it's fun, but after a time, it's uncomfortable. So our rooms are designed with this kind of thing in mind as well. And so now we want to think, how do we plan a new group? You don't have to think, I'm splitting a group. I don't want you to do that. I want you to take a seed out of your group and plant it in a new place. That's the ultimate goal of every small group Sunday school class. So think of how can I maximize intimacy? How can I then multiply to create the intimacy again? Because we already have ministry level groups that are doing the bigger group type of work. And we as small groups are trying to do the smaller, more personal touch. Okay. So those are our 3 ideals. And those are things we're aiming for. May not get there every time or right this second, but long term, that's what we're shooting for every class to be. Every step toward that is a good thing. Now I want to hand you out a couple of worksheets. We'll look over them for future reference. Not every class is each class will get 3. Got a blank. Got a blank one of those. This is pretty easy. This is stuff you'll be taking with you. You don't have to. This isn't a quiz you got to fill out today or anything. Did I give you no Pathfinders? I'm sorry. Give that to Phil. Like I said, I'm recording this for the other classes as well. Hopefully, the volume is and video are picking up. Okay, so let's look at these ideals worksheets. So the first one we'll look at is which way do I want to go with this? The year of ministry. I know that some of you have done a good job of like pushing your group to try to get these things together. So I wanted to provide something that like you could tack up on your board. And all 3 of these, I encourage you to tack this on your board at the top if you have space or somewhere in your room. So that people are like, hey, what's that? And you'd be like, oh, this is what Corbin wants us to do. So if you don't want to feel like it's you pushing against them, you can say it's me pushing for these things. And I'm fine with that. But you see, each quarter, I flipped which one comes first, encourage or evangelize. I encourage you to go through and whenever you get a chance, whether you want to do it quarter by quarter, or you want to take one Sunday and do it all at once, pick an activity to do as a group to, for example, in the first quarter, to encourage, to do fellowship together. Okay, just pick it as a group. It can be anything, totally arbitrary choice. There's not a set expectation. If someone's like, hey, we could go burgers at my house, write it down. They just signed up. That's it right there. We've got an event. It doesn't have to be complicated. Like one Sunday morning, my group for Family Foundations, they have a hard time wanting to commit to something. I'm like, one Sunday morning, I was like, we're just going to go to J Moore Farm sometime in October. And we're getting closer, and I'm about to pick a date. And I'll just tell them. And then if I tell them far enough in advance, usually a few of them can make it. And if they can't, it's okay. But once they get that rhythm established, especially if you plan really far ahead, people can calendar it. So do an encourage, and then think of some outreach activity. It can be true evangelism where you go tell people about Jesus. It can be some service. It can be taking a week to just go pass out care bags to the homeless. Like that's an outreach thing you can do as a group. So that would be the second. So I would say do one in each quarter first, and then come back and schedule a second in that quarter if you can make it happen. But I wanted you to be able to put that on your board and say, Corbin wants us to do this, to fulfill our role in the Northlake Ministry Matrix. All right, so that's your year of Sunday school ministry. It has your class name on it, and you can go through and fill out what activity you're going to do and what date. And the way that a lot of times scheduling works is you just have to pick an activity, and after you do that, then you figure out how to do it. Don't try to figure out how to do it all before you plan it, because you'll just never plan it. Just say it's happening, somebody better figure it out, and then you'll start talking and you'll make a plan. But pick an activity, pick a date. The point is getting together. The point is doing an activity. And just in that, you'll grow as a group. You'll grow as Christians. Next one is, let's look at the group leaders worksheet. You can also post this on the top of your board. Fill out anyone, like some classes already have some of these roles filled out, which is great. But you can put folks in here that are already signed up for that. And if not, just tack this on your board and say, hey, Corbin wants us to have these people do these roles in each class. Would anyone feel called forward or want to volunteer, be voluntold to do one of these other positions? Now, one thing about Christianity and leadership in Christianity, so you guys are all here because you're leaders in some form of a Sunday school group, is that your job is sometimes to tell people that they are called. I'm partly joking, I'm partly serious. Because as Christians, sometimes people don't realize that they don't see that God is gifting them to do something. They don't see that they're good at talking to people about Jesus, or they're aware of the needs in the community. Like if someone's always talking about, I noticed, I worked at a homeless shelter in the past, and or I've helped with drug addicts, and you're like, this person has done outreach ministry before. Hey, you got some ideas of things we could do as a group? Can you be our outreach coordinator? I think God might have gifted you for that. Like you suggest that to them. The Lord speaks by his Spirit through his people. And usually we think to us, but sometimes you guys are thinking from you as well. So if you see someone that seems to have those abilities, or someone that's good at keeping up with people, if you have a networker in your group, you notice, like that's their personality style, say, hey, would you be able to keep up with folks, keep track, maybe call if someone's out, check on them, keep track of prayers. Or somebody that's really social and they're good at planning events, or they're always having people over their house. Say, hey, would you be a fellowship coordinator? Now, if you're the teacher, you're welcome to do multiple if you have time, but I don't think that should be an expectation. I'll schedule some like fellowship gatherings for my group because I'm trying to do that as a Sunday school leader, as a like director or whatever, to help our whole Sunday school do that. But normally it's too much for one person to do all of those things. And there's a reason that I put co-teachers. The idea is you could make one of those apprentice teacher if you want. The idea is have a second person there, not just for when you're out, but for the future. And this is our third worksheet I want to look at. And this is the planting a group worksheet. So we talked about that ideal size. And there comes a point where as you add more people, you actually reduce the effectiveness of your group. Right? Like it's because of space and people don't feel comfortable, they can't focus, or because of coordination, you're not able to get people together. So it's somewhere around that range of 15, give or take some amount, depending on how good you are coordinating it. You might be able to get it up to 25 and be healthy. But generally, when you start averaging about 15, I would say you should start thinking about how can we plant a new group. Because we have 3 or 4 classes that get regularly hit about 15, maybe up to 18, maybe down to 14, 13, but they stay there consistently. There's not many groups that just go all the way up to 25, 30 and just stay there. Most of them plateau out 10, 15 because of the things we're talking about. It's almost an intuitive sense that people have of how groups work. So the idea is that second teacher, that apprentice teacher or co-teacher, eventually, if you're running out of space, might be able to go say, hey, let me find a fellowship coordinator, right? Oh, I'm supposed to put these I have this up here. Sitting here holding a piece of paper this whole time. On the board, you can see these different positions. Now, one person could possibly do a couple of those again, like I said. That'd be fine. But I think you probably need at least 5 people if you're going to plan to class. You might be thinking, that's pretty small. I regularly have like 5 people in my class, and it's a great time. Like, we're a pretty fresh new class. Parents that are out sometimes and others in. But 5 people is a good Bible study. You can talk about stuff. You can actually dig into the text. You don't have to be surface level. It's nice. So I would say you want to have at least 5, but usually things like, think about having somebody that's going to teach, somebody that's going to do fellowship coordinator up front. Those are some of those things. And that in-reach coordinator might go with fellowship, just keeping track of people. How can we make sure that we're calling people ahead of time before class or to get the group going? Or after the group's going, just keep track of them. I think the in-reach and outreach coordinator are things you can do along the way, especially as you choose like these seed members. And these are just people that are going to come be in a class. People that you think might want to go in Sunday school or new members that you just noticed started coming. You can get a couple of those, then you can have enough to start a class with 5 people. And when you give that place and you give a space for more people to come, you'll be able to bring others into the group. Okay. So that's planting a group. It's relatively simple. You need 2 or 3 leaders, 2 or 3 seed members. And if you got 5, you can ride, right? And we can give you a space, a room, and it'll be small and close. And you'll eventually start having some other people come in. You hit 15, you do it again. Okay, so think multiplication, not expansion. Intimacy, not largeness or whatever. Okay, well, that's our time pretty much. I want to stop there. Any questions about this stuff before I wrap us up with a prayer and final word? Okay, if you can't fill these out, you're not a failure. All right, if your class is like, I simply will not sign up to make one activity, or I will not sign up to be a coordinator, that's probably not your fault. All right, I realize you guys are working hard to do that. And if you try a couple times, like, look, seriously, post these on your board. Say, hey, Corbin said, and they kind of explain. Like, you probably have to plan to take 15 minutes of a class to talk about it, so shorten your lesson. Say, hey, Corbin wants us to do some of these things, and think about this. Can we see, does anyone want to do these things? And if they say no, and you try that for like a month, and nobody says anything, then we'll start planning Sundays for me to just come into the class and say, hey, can I get someone to sign up to be an in-reach coordinator? Because we have to, if we're going to accomplish the ministry in our community that Northlake's got to do, is meant to do, right? It's going to be through these small groups. Our other ministries can do things well, and they have their own purposes that small groups can't do. But some of these things we've said today are the things that only small groups can do, or that small groups can do in a unique way that's particularly effective in our society and culture right now, especially in the transition that we're in. So to wrap it all up, being in the societal transition where people are looking for relationships after being separated from people for a couple of years, being in a church transition where people are looking for community and consistency, small groups are going to make a huge impact. And then just more broadly in postmodern culture, people don't trust big stages and big speakers. Every celebrity they know has some moral failure. People trust personal relationships. Small group has a unique ability to meet people and speak to them in our culture. Other parts of our ministry at church aren't able to do for whatever reason. So I hope that's helpful to you and encouraging. I wanted to give you these practical things so you can strong arm, and I'm just going to talk to your class about what it looks like to do true Sunday school ministry, because many people have the misconception it's just about Bible study. And we have to break that as a church. It's simply not the case. It wasn't designed for that originally. Arthur Flakes Sunday school, when he launched the thing, the whole theory was this kind of thing. And that's what we see in Acts 2 as well. House to house. You read that's in there, right? House to house. There's a reason. Okay, that's it. Let me pray for you, and we can head out. You can take your food with you, cookies, that kind of stuff. Here. Father, thank you for the chance to consider what it means to do Sunday school here today. Lord, thank you for these leaders that are willing to step up and volunteer, and to hope that you might call someone in their group to work alongside them, or to work alongside them to do your ministry in this community. It's certainly daunting at times to feel like, oh, we're supposed to coordinate that. But Lord, I pray that you would help these leaders here feel the grace that you offer. That your expectation is just another step forward, not perfection. Lord, I pray you would empower them, help them to see the people that you're calling to ministry, that you're calling to work at this level of ministry. Lord, that you would be honored as they begin to do that, even in the smallest steps, even in the first fellowship gathering, the first outreach, the second, the third that they do, the first person that volunteers to be a coordinator. Lord, pray you be glorified and honored. Lord, bless these folks, give them motivation, and Lord, I pray that they feel comfortable asking for help when they need it. To not feel all the pressure is on them, or that the responsibility is theirs if their class is, for lack of a better term, being obstinate. Lord, give them the grace, just like you did Moses. He had a hard time. Lord, these folks, when they have a hard time, give them your grace and your promise that you're with them all. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, thanks, y'all.
Can you print off and make a middle school and high school class? And then I'll give them.
I'll send you a copy. So let me see.
Then when we don't make it, I'll say, well, this is where we start.